Okay, so thank you for having me. Thank you for a nice introduction, and I hope you join me in my rabbit hole. So if you're here, it means it's also your rabbit hole. So let's make this rabbit hole as cozy as possible for everyone. And this is a talk that is called "The Drain of Scientific Publishing," and it will be talking a bit about the state of publishing and how we can improve it. Now let's start. So we start with something that we should all know, but just to set the stage. So academic publishing is going under exponential growth. So this is the data from a paper we made, one of the ones we'll be talking about. And this is looks like a cumulative distribution. It's not. It's just that by year, the number of papers in this case in Scopus and Web of Science increased from 1.7 million per year to about 3 million per year, and this has been increasing further. So we have this exponential growth, and this is not news. So there's been exponential growth in published science forever, from when we can measure. And people have been complaining it for a long time. So this is a paper from Science in 1981 that says there are too many papers. And this is the oldest reference I could find in which there is a scholar from the Middle Ages, from the Arabic Middle Ages, that said there are too many papers. So basically, there's always been too many papers. And if I stopped there are too many papers, it would be just me yelling at clouds. But the thing I'm going to say is that having a lot of papers is a good thing. And we will not be talking mostly about this enormous amount of papers because it means there are more scientists, which is a good thing. There are more funds for research, which is also a good thing. Open access means that more stuff is available. Web makes faster dissemination. So everything is good. I think this having a lot of paper is a good thing. The problem we identified with co-authors some years ago is that the number of scientists is not keeping up with the number of papers. So the number of science is increasing, but the number of new scientists has a lower increase, a lower growth rate than the number of new papers, which means that we're having more papers per scientist per year. And you can see the yellowish thing on the right, the ratio scale on the right, and we moved from about 0.3 paper per scientist per year to about 0.6, 0.7, and this is going up. So which means that we are producing more. We are basically writing more and maybe reading less. We are allocating our work into writing more stuff and writing more papers. And this whole, what we call this, we call the strain of scientific publishing. People are publishing more per capita. And we see that the system has cracks a bit everywhere. So the system is under tension because this mass of paper is coming in, and we've got several issues. One issue is that the fees for some journals are going up, and so some editors, and that's the case of a journal of FI Elsevier in 2023, they just resigned en masse and say we create new journals because it's too costly to do. One other thing, and one reasons why one of the contributors to having more papers is that there are these firms called paper mills, and they create fake or fake-ish papers. They make their way into the real journals, and once the papers are accepted or conditionally accepted or on the revision stage, they just sell the authorship to other people. And this is their business model. They create fake papers and they sell the authorship to people that are willing to pay to have a paper on their name. This is a small part of this growth, but it's part of this growth and is one of the cracks in the system. We see people trying to exploit this publication system, in this case for money. We also have authors playing this game of being super prolific. That's again from 2023, and he's a researcher in Spain that had published 257 papers on that year. And he got fired by the university because it was just suspicious that you could publish one study every 37 hours. And his reply was, "Why do you fire me? I'm doing what you asked me to do. I'm just doing more papers." That's what you want, right? You want more papers. So you see, there is this idea of doing more and more. There's also this idea of doing it faster. This is from Taylor and Francis, and they used to have this scheme at some of their journals. The more you pay, the faster you get through peer review. We will see that across the talk a bit in the fact that publication has become a commodity, has become a service for author. And in case it's a service for authors, of course, a faster service is a better service. You should pay for it. And you have this sort of going faster and paying to go faster. One other consequence of having more papers published per scientist is that people don't find referees, because if everybody's busy writing, you don't have time to read other people's papers. And this has been a cry from several editors, and this is getting from editors I know is getting really dire. Finding editors is becoming more complicated because there are finding referees, sorry, more complicated because there are more papers around and lower number of people to assess them. And this is all I'm gonna say is without taking into account AI. So this is a famous Frontiers paper that had this rat with a huge penis on it. It was a clearly AI produced image. It got retracted, but just everything I'm gonna say is assuming that AI sort of didn't exist, and we looked at the world before AI. But AI is making everything faster, even easier to produce paper, and so we expect it to accelerate things even further. So even with all these cracks, the system is thriving in a sense. So you have many more papers and many publishers are making money. They got listed on stock exchange. RELX is the company owning Elsevier's. And then you have Springer Nature, you have different publishers that are actually quoted on the markets, and they are doing very well on the markets. Why? Because they are making a lot of profits. And we will go back to that later. This is just from Stephanie Houston and colleagues in Ottawa, and it's a plot of how much APC, article processing charges, so what you pay when you publish open access, has been paid. It's not profit, it's revenue from publishers, and just amount of money that we spend to publish open access, and it's gone up from $1 to $2.5 billion per year just at these main publishers. So it's a lot of money. It looks like we are paying more for any system that is increasingly dysfunctional. So the rest of the talk would be about what is going on, why is it the case that we're paying more for a system that increasingly dysfunctional, and what can we do if that is the case? The talk is organized around 3 papers that I produce with a host of co-authors. Co-authors will be listed for each of these papers. And that you see here. So the first is the strength of scientific publishing, is about the status of publishing. We published that 2024. The second is about special issues, so it's focusing on one specific topic, special issues. And the third is more of a policy paper that tries to set the stage of what we could do to improve the system. That is, the second and third are preprints and recent ones. So the first thing I will bore you with is how does publishing actually work, with a very simple scheme to show just the main traits of this industry. So let's imagine there are 3 main actors. One is funders. They actually give the money to the people that do these things. So imagine national science foundations, universities. There are researchers doing the actually science job, and there are publishers that are running the journals. This is a bit of a stretch, because in reality, researchers are also working at publishers and researchers are also working at funders. So it's a bit mixed. But let's imagine there are these 3 different actors. Now, if these are the 3 different actors, what does the system do for them? And for scientists, if we are a scientist, what you want out of the publication system is that it disseminates your finding. You have a finding, other people can read it, but crucially, you want reputation. So you want to disseminate, to put it in a place that gives you reputation, so that you can use it to get a job, to get tenure, to get better salary, to do your career. That's our current money. And at the same time, as a reader, it allows me to sort and to look into this mass of millions of paper. Which ones should I read? If you're a publisher, what you want of the system basically is profit, if you're for profit. And why do you get these profits? By dissemination. So there is a concordance of needs with the scientists. So the farther your papers go, the more reputation you get. But you also want them to be sustainable. So you want to make money now and money tomorrow and money in 10 years, not all the money today and then tomorrow everything is gone. And if you're a funder, you use the system for selection. The system is giving you signals about the quality of scientists, and you can hire people based on the signal can come from this sort of system. And also to prioritize, whom should I fund? And I look at what was published last year, what is the frontier of science, and this is where you put funds. And if you're a public funder, which is the case of most of them, you want public access to the results because you paid for it, and you want the public that paid for it to actually get the results of the science. Now, what the actors want from a system is usually different than what the system does for them. And here will be the cynical economist making the most cynical possible outlook on the people. If you're a scientist, what you want is the highest possible reputation for your paper for the lowest possible effort. We all want our paper to be published in Science and Nature, and if it's not a good paper but it goes in anyway, we'll be happy. And crucially, and that will be crucial in the rest of the talk, we want stability. So we want that the signals from the market stay at the level they are. Imagine I publish in a very high reputed journal today, but then the journal for some reason is hijacked or loses reputation. Then my paper will sync with the journal. And I don't want that. So a good journal is one that keeps the reputation in time. And this is the one I'm looking for. Publishers also want that. They want high reputation because the reputation allows author goes to them. So they collect, if they have a high reputation journal, they are sitting on a rent. And then they have a trade-off. They want more papers because more papers means more money, but more papers might mean lower reputation at some point. You have to get some papers in that are maybe not the you increase quantity, quality at some point will go down. And in general, they try to find a way to get more revenues. And if you are a funder, you also want stability because you want to be able to trust. You want the market to give you some true signals. You don't want to have some fake signals. This looks like a very good scientist, but it's not because basically, I don't know, paid its way into journals. And also you don't want it to be super expensive. You're spending a lot of money. You are the one running the system, so you want it to be cheap. So you see there are some tensions there. And how does the system work in our simple scheme is that the funders give the funds to the researchers, and then the researchers give these funds to the publishers, so when in the forms of APCs. And they also give their labor to the publishers in terms of papers and refereeing. And in exchange of all this money and labor that gets in, publisher reap some profits and they send quality signals to everyone. And this is a bit like a scheme we have in mind. Now, this is the perfect scheme. So it should work this way. Now, how is it really working nowadays? So that's the first paper. So the first paper, we looked at lots of data about how the system was actually working. And this is what we're going to present next. This is a joint effort with Mark, which is here in the audience. Thanks, Mark, and Pablo and Dan. And we were interdisciplinary, different countries. We all moved to a different country. We met online and we started this out of passion. And the question of this paper was: we have this exponential growth with this limited growth in number of researchers. What are the trends that are driving these dynamics? And what we did is that we collected a lot of data. And most of the data was public. So we got rankings from SciMago, we got OECD data, US data about number of researchers. But then we scraped. So we used web scraping techniques to get the data out of about 5 million papers. Because many data, unfortunately, are not available online, and you had just to go and scrape them. And then we looked at some publisher reports, and we requested some publisher for data, which some of them allowed us to take. So we have different set of data. And what did we do in this paper? We built 5 indicators. None of these indicators per se is critical, but if you look at them together, they allow you to see where the system is going. The first indicator was just the number of papers and the size of the journals. And that's a very simple indicator. We just look at numbers. Then we look at the number on the role of special issues. It will be clear later why. And crucially, the scrape was done for turnaround time. So how much time does it take for a paper to be accepted, conditionally on being accepted, because you observe only the accepted papers. Then we looked at rejection rate. And it's something that we built ourselves. It's called the impact factor inflation. It will be clear later. How do I structure this talk on this paper? So this is about the growth of the system. How much did it grow in the last 10 years? And I want you to understand that growing just doesn't mean more of the same. So here is Dubai in 1950 in 2025. It's not the same place anymore. It's not just bigger. It's just very different. And by growing, you change. And so the whole industry changed, and also the meaning of words changed. And I will organize the exposition around the meaning of words, some semantics. So there was been a first semantic shift from, if you think of the word journal, used to mean that it was a physical object with limited availability of space. And now it also means, and here also is very important, because the former model of small journals still exists, but at the same time, there exist some journals that are only online and they are limitless. For example, PLOS ONE is publishing about 10,000 papers a year, and some MDPI journals are publishing 20,000 papers a year. Scientific reports publish 20,000+ papers a year. So the two coexist. You can say I publish in a journal. It could be the old type that is very selective, very small. It could be the new type that is more open and very big. And what happened in the data, what can we see in the data? What can see the data is that the mega journals, so these big journals with 10,000, 20,000 paper 20 per year, are increasing much more. So you have the growth rate of mega journals that publish more than 10 papers per day is 1,400%, while the growth rate of small journals is much more limited. So, which means that the first thing is that the industry is concentrating into bigger journals that are these online repositories. Second semantic shift, you used to say publication, and it used to mean that you had a limited set of journals, usually with long delays. So you send your paper, it takes a long time to be accepted. The acceptance rates were usually low. It used to be free for authors. It was a reader pay service. And the idea was that people could live with a few articles in their life, and it was good. And the problem of this sort of system was that maybe good papers were rejected because the threshold was high, acceptance rates were low, few journals. So you had this downside of having good science rejected. Now it also means, and again, the two are coexisting, that you have thousands of journals with short or very short delay that accept much more, many papers. The acceptance rate is much higher, in which the authors are paying. And you have this publish and perish thing that you have to do it or you die. I'm talking to colleagues that said we want our PhD students to have 10 papers published by the time they finish the PhD. So it's, more. And the potential downside here is that pet science can be accepted. So you have the other downside on the other side. And the two coexist, right? And what can we see in the data is that the second model in which the author pays and in which it's easier to publish, you have a lower rejection rate, is driving most of the growth. So you look at MDPI, so this for-profit open access model, MDPI and Frontiers, they stand out because this is all they do. So they are for-profit and they're only open access. They have the highest growth rate. I mean, everybody grew, Elsevier grew, everybody was growing, but the bulk of the growth is in this new mega journal open access author pays journal. There's also another semantic shift. The business model of the publishers that was invented in the 50s by Maxwell and other people in publishing industry was that they were having many small journals. They would go to all scientific societies and say, "Oh, you have this nice journal. Can I run it for you?" And scientific society said yes in exchange for some money and some deals. And the idea was a subscription model. So the readers are paying, you get money to subscription, and whatever you get money to subscription, what you want is what I call polish your gems. So you might have some bad quality or middle quality journal, but you need to have some good gems in your bundle such that people pay the subscription. It's the same with Netflix. With any subscription model, you need some hits so that people stay there. You have an incentive to have at least some quality to polish your gems. Then you need quantity in the terms of covering niches with all your journals, but you still have this incentive to quality. Now, if you move to this second business model, that again, they coexist, it also means that you have this mega journal model in which the author paying, and you make money through publication, which means that in this case, your business model has to be to get authors on board because it's the authors bringing you the money. So you want authors to publish with you rather than with your competitor. And this is where we see all these artifacts of peer review, pay faster for a faster peer review, higher acceptance rate, because in this second model, publication is more of a service to the author rather than a service to the reader. And in this case, you have an incentive to increase the quantity rather than the quality. Then you have a quality check. If you publish only rubbish, then authors will not want to come to you. But it's not your problem if people read your papers or not. The only problem you have are the authors coming to me. And the other crucial thing in this difference of business model is that on the left business model, when you have the reader pay, you sell the same papers several times to every subscriber. On the right model, you sell your paper exactly once to the author. So you see that the incentive of quantity is much higher. You need to sell more papers to stay afloat and to make profit. And these two coexist. So, and sometimes in the same publisher, sometimes in the same journal. So the same journal has both models that work at the same time. And what happened? So this commodification of authors are paying, so commodification of publishing, led to lower turnaround times in the journals and in the publishers that use this model more. So these MDPI Frontiers and Indawi, that doesn't exist anymore. It was different publishers that use this open access for profit model. And for them, the turnaround times went down. And in the case of MDPI, they are really, really low. This is 37 days from submission to acceptance, including any revision round. And for other journals that are more or less in this less for profit, in the case of profit is not for profit, or still use the subscription model, you see that the turnaround time is much higher, about 6 months, and it goes down to about 1 month. The second thing that happened, and this is actually more impressive to me than the fact that the turnaround time went down, is that the variance in turnaround time went down. So if you look at MDPI, this is the variance, the heterogeneity in turnaround time across 6 years. And what you see is that it was already very small in 2016 for MDPI, and it went down to in 2002 even more, to the point that basically all papers have more or less the same turnaround time. And this is because it goes, so the acceptance of papers got industrialized. Imagine, look at Wiley here or at PLOS. You run different journals with different editors from different disciplines, and of course there is a variance, a high variance in turnaround times. But at MDPI and at Frontiers to a lower extent, and all the journals that are open access and for profits, this is going really hammer down into an industrial process in which every paper gets the same treatment. The third thing that happened in this change of business model is that if you need to get the authors on board, you need to set signals that the authors will recognize, signals of quality, so that the authors can come to you. And the signal of quality that is used in this industry is the impact factor. What is the impact factor? It's the number of citations for each paper on average on a journal over a span of years, let's say 2, 5, whatever. The problem with this indicator is that it's very easily gamed. You can just ask your authors to cite more from your own journal. You have citation rings. We have papers documented this. You can just increase the number of references, and we have evidence that this happens. So papers used to have like 10 references, 15 per papers. Now they are at 50, 70. So you just increase the numbers. Everybody's running this. So what we do in this paper is that there exists another indicator. It's called the Cymago Journal Rank. It's free for you to download it through our website for it. That basically is a network weighting of citations. So one citation counts 1 in impact factor, one citation doesn't count 1. In this SJR, it depends on where it comes from. It's like Google page rank. If I get cited by a very prestigious journal, this counts more than if I'm cited by myself or by a not prestigious journal. So basically they measure the same thing, but the SJR is less easily gained. So what we did, we just took the ratio of the two. They're supposed to measure the same thing. One is easily gained, the other is less easily gained. Let's see how the ratio goes. And what we see, so this impact, what we call impact factor inflation, is the ratio of the impact factor to the SJR. And what we see in this plot is that the ratio is always higher than 1, which doesn't mean much, but it means that in a way there is a sort of inflation to start with. And if you look at the dynamics, so the blue points of 2016 and the green points 2022, what happened is that every publisher that we have in our data set is doing this game of increasing the impact factor if they can. And some are doing it more than others. They are basically inflating their impact factor more. And it makes sense, right? So authors are lured by the impact factor. It's easily to game. You will game it. And everybody's doing it. And it's a race to arms. So even if you don't want to do it, if your competitors are doing, then you will have to do it. So we have all these changes that happen because of this shift in publisher business model. The last semantic shift for this paper would be what we call special issue. So a special issue, you all know what that is a special issue of the journal that it's about a specific topic, maybe because of a conference, because of a Nobel Prize or something. And it's once in a while, once a year, twice a year, once every 2 years. There is a guest editor, but it's under the strict control of the editors, and there are many more regular issues and special issues. Now, this changed. Under some publishers, they took the idea of special issue and they said, oh, it would be a nice way to do network marketing. And it became, after passing through this prism of saying, let's have some network marketing and let's call it special issue. It became a many a day issue. Some journals have 10 special issues per day, 15 special issues per day. about any topic or very loose control with inviting people by spam email campaigns. Like, do you want to edit a special issue? That happened to me. I was invited to edit a special issue by a spam email. And there are many more special issues than regular issues. So that's a plot from our paper in which every box is 800 articles, and the red boxes are special issues, and the blue boxes are regular issues. And you see clearly that for some publishers, most of what they produce is on special issues. And per se, who cares? It's just a label. The problem is that it is not just a label. The authority to decide on the papers has been offloaded to an invited guest editor. So the control is lower. The control you can exert on your journal. And we'll see later in the second paper that this has consequences. So if we sum up all these indicators, I have a nice table. What we see is that in general, there's been this growth, this 47% growth over 6 years, which is already quite impressive. But the growth is uneven. So the MDPI and Frontiers and these sort of open access for-profit journals are growing like at 20 times or 10 times the average of the market. There is a special issuization of the publishing industry. On average, the turnaround times are going down, especially at open access for-profit journals. Rejections rates are also going down, and everybody is doing the impact inflation game, and some are doing it more than others. Unfortunately, we cannot share the data, so that's an unfortunate thing about web scraping. You are allowed to web scrape and use the data for analysis. You are not allowed to share the results of your web scraping in general. Which means that we don't. But we provide tools. So there is this tool that was done mostly by Pablo, and is a Shiny app, online dashboard. You can look each journal and look at find our indicators, the one I showed you in the table for each journal. So here I just show for Nature and MDPI sustainability, but you can look it up and see the indicators for your journal. How many special issues, how many papers, what is the turnaround time, these sort of things. So if I make a summary of what we learned in this first paper is that we have this concentration. Growth is driven by concentration into mega journal, is a crazy growth of special issue. There is a industrialization of peer review at some publishers, and everybody is running for their guns to have more impact factors. So you have these impact factor sounds race. What is the problem of this? Because we could say, okay, who cares? That's what happened. What happened? There are two problems. One is that this looks like a bubble. It does look a bit like a bubble. And how much can we grow before this sort of bubble bursts? And this is before AI, right? So this could be even a bigger bubble. The second problem is this, what we would call Goodhart's law, is that when a measure becomes a target, it stops to be a good measure. And we see it in the case of impact factor. Impact factor becomes a target, people start gaming it, and now is no more a good measure. And the important risk here is the instability of the quality signals. Remember, so the system is supposed to provide quality signals to everyone. The funders are supposed to use it to hire people, and the researchers are supposed to use it to read stuff. And now the quality signals are more and more blurred. So you don't really know what you're reading. And this is a problem for researchers. It's even more a problem for the public that has to trust the result of the publication system in a system in which the quality signals are not really good anymore. And this is a system under strain. So the funders some funders somewhere were imposing publishers or perish into researchers. Researchers are publishing more and faster. This costs an increasing amount of money that is reaped by the publisher. And at the same time, this is leading to lower quality signals, so we don't really know what we're looking at. And that's the dynamic that is actually making the system harder to read for everybody involved in it. So that was the first paper. And then we moved on and we said, okay, but in the first paper, we were focusing on publisher. And you might be excused if you get away from my part of the talk saying, no, MDPI is a bad guy, and that's it. The problem is that there are bad guys. Now, the problem is not bad guys exist for a reason. And the reason is that many people are to blame, and it's the system, right? And so it is what we call an addictive relationship. And this is how we describe this addictive relationship. You have a demand for papers. I am a scientist. I want my paper I demand for publication. I have an incentive to publish open access in Europe. I have an incentive to publish more and faster because I want to have a career. There is tougher competition. There are more people from other countries. So I want to have these papers and I want to have them now published. And on the supply, we'll organize to provide this to me. And they did. So the supply said, okay, you want more papers? No worries. We will lower the turnaround times. We will give you special issues so that we multiply the possibility to publish. We lower the rejection rates. We have mega journals so we can easily accommodate your extra papers. And, sorry, it's author pay. So it's the author that pays. So you want it? Just pay for it. Fine. And we see this circle. So we give so the researchers is giving money and labor to the publishers, and the publishers supply paper slots and reputation. And it's a system. So there maybe nobody's a bad guy, it's just a system that is working this way. And this is a citation from Pogo, one of my favorite comics. And at some point he says, we have met the enemy and he is us. And we are a bit part of the system as authors, and everybody is part of this running system. And I give two examples of this addictive relationship, and one is what I call demand always finds its own supply. So what happened, this is a graph from Clark and Exposito. There are some lawyers that deal with publishing, and they are in the publishing industry. And they have this data from Dimension that shows that the number of articles published by MDPI, Frontiers, and Hindawi had a peak and then decreased. And this is because of reputations hit. People got to know the sorts of practices, even our own paper. So they attract, if you have a scandal, you attract a lower number of authors. So you could see, okay, this is getting better. So these guys are attracting lower, the authors are changing their way. But it's not what happened, because what happens is that when one of your competitor takes a hit for reputation, other publishers are just jumping in and doing the same thing. And we have evidence, so that we have a blog post in which we show that Springer Nature created a lot of journals that have the same names and exactly the same names as MDPI journals, or very nearly the same names. So this is MDPI journals, and this is the Springer Natural Discover journal, open access for profit, same business model, same name, but half of the APC. So this is just marketing 101. Your competitor is in the problem, create the same service and undercut its price. And they did it for all the journals. So they created 40 new journals in a year with the same name. So they clearly want to get that demand. People don't want to go to MDPI anymore. No worries, we get you sorted. And just to laugh together, we made a video game in which you can guess if this journal is from Discover, from MDPI, or from both, and you can flash it and have some fun. And it's actually hard to know who is doing what. And why do I tell you all this? Because this is not alone. It's not just Discover. So again, this is from Esposito and Clarkey, and what they show is that from 2020 to 2024, corresponding with the decline in Frontiers and MBPI, other journals had explosive growth. These Curios, Scientific Reports, Nature Communication, Helion, they are from Elsevier in this case, they are from Nature, they are from different publishers, but they have this open access for profit. They are mega journals, and they basically increased by 70% year over year. And so the demand just got elsewhere. People have demand for cheap and easy papers. They just got somewhere else. And it's a cycle, because what happens a month ago is that Curios was delisted by Clarivate, saying, oh, you're overstepping, you are getting in fake papers, your quality is going down, you will not have an impact factor anymore. And the cycle repeats. So this demand will go somewhere else. And this is where you have this toxic relationship and people just looking for outlets. Second example of what we call an addictive relationship is this second paper that we call Publishing Support of Self. And it's this Publishing Support of Self team is from 3 of the 4 original authors. So it's me, Pablo, and Mark. And what this paper deals with is something called endogeny. Endogeny is when a guest editor of a special issue publish their own papers in their own guest edited special issue. I accept to edit a special issue, and then I publish my own paper. Now, in a way, it's normal because there are editorials. I edit a special issue, I do an editorial. Then I'm an expert if I got invited, and then I could have my co-authors network so it's in a way it's normal. But you cannot escape the fact that there is a conflict of interest, because even if, and this is always the case, it's not the actual editor making the final decision on his own actual paper, there is a clear conflict of interest in which the publisher has an incentive for this special issue to go through. So the publisher will be hard put to say, no, don't publish your own papers, because again, every paper brings money, so they want the papers. And also the reviewers. Am I really saying no to the guy that is actually running the special issue? So you see that it's ripe for conflict of interest. And while we might agree that this is not a problem in general, it reminds us of a common pool resource in what we call the tragedy of the commons. So imagine there is a reputation of a journal, and the reputation of the journal is the water in the reservoir. Now, if everybody starts to say, yeah, I will make an exception for myself, I will just publish my own paper, it's not so good, but it's my special issue, so I'll do it. You're basically extracting reputation, extracting water. And if everybody does it, at some point there will be no water to extract. And this is called the tragedy of the commons. And since journal reputation is a common pool resource, if you invite lots of guest editors to guest edit and you give them the power to publish their own papers, you are degrading this common pool resource. The question is how much, right? So because we could all agree that one paper in 10% endogeny is not a problem. So but we will all agree that 100% endogeny is a problem. I get a special issue and I publish only my papers. This is a problem. So where is the threshold? And different publishers have different thresholds. One famous threshold is 25%. So sorry, one paper out of 4. Editor is the author. Frontiers has a 30% endogeny threshold. And some journals, especially ones I know in economics, they just rule it out. You edit a special issue, you have 0 of your papers in the special issue, and that's a rule. So different fields differ about this. We don't question that. We just look at what happened and say, do publisher, editors, and authors comply? And why is it important? Because we saw before that there was a special issueization of publishing, and now more papers are published in special issues than normal issue. So we want to look at how is this delegation of editorial power being managed by the community. So we have this question, how much endogeny is too much? And we define a threshold of 33%, which we call publish in support of self, because it makes for a nice acronym, and there will be a reason for that. So then we can debate it, right? 33% might be too low, might be too high. The pros, it is higher than any policy. So we choose a threshold that is higher than any policy, any existing policies. It's also suitable for small special issue. Even imagine you have 3 papers. It means that one paper can be yours, but 2 have to be of other people. Makes sense. And on the other hand, it's clearly arbitrary. We could decide that 32% is fine, or it can be too low, it can be too high. We can have a discussion about that. What did we do in this paper? So it's 100% scraping, and we scraped 100,000 special issues over 10 years that contain about 1 million articles from these publishers here. That are the publishers that publish more special issues. So basically, I think we cover the large plurality of special issues they were published in these 10 years. What do we do is that we looked at the mean endogeny, at the prevalence of endogeny by publisher, at how much publishing support of self, so excessive endogeny exists by journals, and who are the worst offenders. And we provided the most detailed cartography yet of this, because there was no data on this. It's very easy to get the data, but there was no data, so we want to know how this delegation of editorial power was used. And what we already knew before we started is these anecdotes. There are anecdotal evidence that some people publish in support of self a lot. These are 2 MDPI journals, different ones, in which in one case there was one editor that authored 23 out of 24 papers in his own special issue. And in that case, there are 2 editors, 27 out of 28. This is a bit excessive. I mean, they publish their own papers in their own special issue. But in general, what happens is that these cases are rather rare, but at the same time, this is not good news, because the idea of having peace, of publishing support of self, is a bit open. So it's not really a taboo, and so you have it in a moderate but consistent amount. And in general, about 1 paper in 7, so 14%, is endogenous. So and this is discounting, we don't count editorials. And you have this idea that 1 in 6, 1 in 7, 1 in 8 papers is the editor having an easier path and exploiting a bit of a conflict of interest and publishing her own paper in her own special issue. What is surprising is that we were expecting some publishers to be worse than others, and in reality, this is not really the case. So the endogeny rate, so the number the share of endogenous paper is actually basically very similar across publishers, which means that if the publisher close their eyes and allow it, then the editors will do it, because of course there is an incentive to do it. I am an editor, I have some power, I will use it to please myself and my friends. And if it's not put in check, people will do it. And what is the problem and why we use this common pool resource concept? Because, and this PEACE acronym. Now, if few people publish in support of self a lot, you have a couple of people pissing in the pool, it's not a big deal. But if you 1 in 7 people are pissing in the pool, then, you know, the water changes color. So we are looking at this general reputation problem of special issue in general if we allow people to publish their own papers. In absolute terms, you cannot deny that most of this publishing in support of self occurs at MDPI. In relative terms, it's similar across a publisher, which means that if you give the opportunity, people do it in similar ways. But some publishers give the opportunities more than others and publish many more special issues than others. So MDPI has the lion's share of this. But we have stats by journals, so you can look at every journal and look how big a journal is and what is the average number of special issues that are flagged as excessive endogeny. And in some cases, 100%. So a journal publishes only endogenous special issues. In some cases, it's less. But again, the problem is at the mid-range. It's not the extremes. This is very little. The problem is in the mid-range. We still can find that the problem is concentrated. We have about 150 journals where 90% of this behavior happens, which also means that this is easily solvable, right? So we don't think this is a very big deal. It's a problem. So it's still we have hundreds of thousands of papers that are endogenous. But the good thing about this problem is that with respect to all the other problems that are big, involve collective action, this is very easy to solve. We discuss a threshold and you apply it. And we gave the name PEACE in order for it to stick. People don't, if you don't like it, we can change the name, but it's very easy to fix. Any publisher can check, oh, this editor is also an author. No, we don't do that, sorry. It's very easy to check. And it's an example of this sort of toxic relationship. We also have an app, so we have an app for everything, and we also have this shiny app in which you can look at the data, journal by journal, special issue by special issue. You can actually click on the points. And if you click on the points, you will redirect it to the page of the special issue in which you see, you can verify how much the editors published in their own special issue by year, by journal, by special issue. So what to do with all of that? So we have this third paper. This is more of a policy paper about what to do and how to change the system. And this is a bigger team, so it's more inclusive, and we have people from different continents and from different disciplines, and we try to gather people to have a sort of forum about what should we do, and we have this sort of policy paper about what should we do. And we call it the drain of scientific publishing, because we're funny guys, but also because we really think that the scientific publishing, instead of being supportive of science, is becoming a burden on science, it's becoming a drain, it's draining stuff from us. And we identify 4 different drains. Drain of money, we've seen this plot before, but we documented the profit margins of the publishing industry. They are one of the highest in the world. They are on par with IT. So these are the profit margins of Microsoft, Google, and Apple. And Microsoft is on par, but the average publisher, scientific publisher, is making more profit, higher profit margins than Microsoft. And they are making higher profit margins than oil companies. So it's very, very high profit margins for these people that are running this system. So there is a drain of money. Money comes from the funders, and instead of funding science, funds the profit of the publishers. There is a drain of time. You can estimate the time that is spent reading and proofreading and reviewing and editing papers. It was estimated as 63 million hours in 2016. And then you have, which means that you have a lot of money spent for that. And then what do you use it to produce even more papers? Then they will read more time to be read and everything. So we have this drain of time that the system is imposing of us. I think the most important one is actually the drain of trust. If the quality signals are blurred and they start to be non-trustable, then we have a problem of trust in science. Can the general public really trust us? And how can we tell if a result is credible or not? And this just became even worse with AI. How can the public trust what is published if the gatekeepers are not keeping the gates, but they are just opening the gates to anyone? And then we have a drain of control. I mean, learned societies and scientists used to control the journals. We outsource the journals to the publishers. And the publisher now control the journals, control the data of the journal, can control the indexing, they control the pricing, they control the whole system. And it's for us, that's why they can charge higher amount of money, because they have all this control and we have to go to them. So you see that this fourfold drain is draining the system, and we are actually paying more for this functional system. And the question is, how can we change this system? The first question when you want to have change is who can lead the change? And in the paper, we make a case that publishers cannot be counted upon to lead the change because they are profiting from the current system, and it would be not very rational of in general. Some of them are better, but not all of them. It would be not very rational for them to change a system that is very profitable to them. So it has to go down to researchers or funders. And again, in any human endeavor, you have two ways of affecting change. One is that you have a bottom up, and this is why we are here in the peer community in a webinar, and we have preprint server, we have grassroots blacklists of publishers, we have the Unjournal, we have very many ways that are trying to be devised to build a bottom up alternative to the system that we live in. And this is very good because it provides alternatives. The problem is that incentives are very hard to beat. And if maybe people say, I will publish in Nature anyways, or I can publish in peer community, but I will tell my PhD students to publish in Nature anyways, because it's hard to do this step. It's a public good game. But it's good because you can create opportunities. On the other hand, you have a top-down approach. It's somebody coming to you and telling you, look, this you should do and this you shouldn't do. And in this case, you have the power of the purse. So some people are actually paying for this, and that's the funders, and they can say, my money, my rules. They can, for example, impose, or instead of imposing quantity rules, impose some quality rules. And they can manage the collective action. It's very hard from the bottom up to do collective action. It's actually very easy from the top down, because of course, if the funders say jump, we just say, how high do I have to jump? Because we need the money to run the science. The problem is that, as I learned the hard way talking to ministers and people in different institutions, is institutional slow and they are also constrained. So what we think is that the best hope for the system is some top-down change that can choose and finance some new novelties that is being created by the bottom-up people. And just an example that top-down change actually works. And this is Clarivate. Clarivate is a private company that releases this impact factor data. And they can decide that the journal is not worthy of an impact factor, and also they take the impact factor away. And in March 2023, they decided to delist, so to take away the impact factor from the by then biggest journal in the world. It was an MDPI journal about public health. It was publishing about 20,000 papers a year. And it lost the impact factor overnight. And what happened? This is the number of accepted papers, so published paper in this journal by month. And what happened in March, you can see it went from about 2,000 a month to about 300 a month, and then it got down again, which means that, top-down works. People are sending signals and say, don't go there. And people say, okay, I'm not going there. And managing such a drop by bottom up is just not going to happen. So top-down, it's actually working. So how can we do it? And in any how to do talk, there are two things: a past destruence, let's destroy what's already there, and a past construence, let's build new stuff. So let's start with the easy part, what we should destroy. So change is already underway. And some funders will just say, we won't pay. We refuse to pay. The system has been too costly. It sends bad signals. We don't want it anymore. This started a year and a half ago when the Bill Gates Foundation said, we are not paying article processing charges of any kind to anyone. We want our money to go to researchers and not to publishers. So, deal with it. The same thing happened a month ago when the Chinese National Science Foundation said, okay, some journals are too expensive. In this case was Nature, the Nature franchise, which is really expensive. A paper in open access paper in Nature can cost up to 15,000 euros. And the Chinese Academy said, I'm not paying that. So they're not paying that anymore. And Chinese researchers will not get funded to pay these open access fees. This happens also in other places, like in Switzerland, they had an ongoing bargaining situation with many publishers, and they were in a no-deal situation, which meant that all the universities in Switzerland had a no-deal with many publishers, which meant that they no access to the journals anymore, and also no APC paid, because there is this tension going on. Other ways in which the change is already happening is that we have some other funders and some that are trying to do other things, not just I won't pay, but like saying, okay, we make a blacklist of journals where you shouldn't publish, and in this case it happened in Finland, and we give it to our scientists, just don't go there. And another approach was taken by the Swiss National Science Foundation in 2024, said they identified that special issues are particularly problematic. So they said, we will find your articles, but not in special issues. So different funders are trying this route of saying, we won't pay. This has a good feeling because change is happening, but it also has a bad feeling because the change is happening by saying, we stop playing. The system is broken. I just stop playing. And this is good, but then the scientists are left out in the cold. You are doing your research, you want to send it somewhere, and you want this reputation, and now you don't have the funds anymore. So how does it work? Which leads us to the parse consequence of the talk. So what can we do? So that we have some. We thought together that it's the time to be a bit radical. And one way to be radical is to, for example, to buy the publishers off. And we run some math and how much would it cost to buy the biggest publisher in the world, and it's about 50 billions, and it's not so much money. I mean, it's a lot of money, but if you think about science budgets all over the world and you imagine that these guys make a third in profit, maybe it's not so good. Then we don't know if the state is going to run these things better than they are running it, but this could be one solution. And the other thing is to go beyond the journals. That's what the peer community is trying to do. That was the unjournal is trying to do. Maybe we don't need this journal idea and we need to move to another sort of system that is not based on journals. But on a more realistic path, there are some points I want to raise. One is that we cannot assume that the publishing is free. Sometimes in this sphere, I get discussions to say, no, but we could publish it for free. And this is not true. So publishing has cost, doing things well has cost, especially if you're rejecting a lot. If you want a quality journal, you will get money only from the, I don't know, 50 papers you publish, and you have to process 1,000 papers. So you have costs for 1,000 and profits for 50. So it's hard to be cost effective. One thing that is still being done is to change the incentives. So instead of asking quantitatively, like publish more, funders could just say publish better. And this is easy to say, less easy to do. But for example, the Swiss are asking now that you bring narrative CVs and not lists, and you have to come with your 3 best papers when you ask for a grant to the National Science Foundation in Switzerland, which means that having the 25th small paper will not help me. And this changes my incentive as a scientist. One way is to go this green open access route. What does it mean? It means that I publish in the normal system. So I have all the cost of the normal system because I have to pay that. But at the same time, I put the paper on a working paper archive somewhere for free in a preprint server, and which means that at least everything is accessible. But we still have all the costs to live with. Or what we push in the paper most is this recommunalization and say, okay, maybe we could take control not of the whole publisher in a while, but one by one. So a Learn Society could retake control of their own journal, buy it back from Elsevier or Wiley or whomever, and turn it into a diamond open access that is free for authors to submit and is free to read. Of course, this has a cost. It must be covered by the funders, but we argue that this will be lower cost than the system as it is right now. So we look at this recommunalization idea in which the funders are, taking away the foot from the accelerator, not flooring it and saying, don't publish as much, maybe do some quality. And the funds are diverted to no-profit societies, to preprint repositories, to recommunalized, in which the publisher will play a role, but no more this bigger role that they used to play. So I thank you for your interest. That's the links to the 3 papers. And sorry for being a bit long. I hope there's still time for discussion.
Thank you, Paolo, for your presentation. We will now take questions from the audience. So we don't have much time, but we can easily extend. And so if you want to ask a question, just write it in the chat and I will read it. There's been a lot of discussions in the chat, so I'm going to have to navigate and find some. So one question from Thomas, isn't it normal that the number of articles per capita increases? After all, we have plenty of tools to increase our productivity, like computers, computing, AI, etc.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, yes, but then, okay, it depends on the incentives, right? You could use this tool to produce a better, longer one paper rather than a smaller lot of them, right? So I think that your point is well taken. As scientists, we're more productive. That's very good. At the same time, the way this productivity plays out in a salami slicing on the papers, that's totally down to the incentives. The productivity could be used to do other things, so just more papers.
There was another question from David. Any stats on reading and use of papers? If no one is reading or using the papers, they have little value.
Good point. The value of the paper is probably not in being read, and that's one of the problems here. Because one value of the paper is in being read, but another value on the paper is in existing and giving me a line on my CV, and that's the reputation part of the paper. And both exist, right? We cannot deny. So the paper can be read, and the paper is also a reputation item. And I suppose that's why people publish more papers, and that's why people are willing to pay to be authors of papers they didn't even write, because they want the reputation value. And a good system is linking those two. So a high reputation value goes with a high reading value. And what I try to argue here is that the incentives are such that the system is no more doing it effectively. So you can have bad faith actors that try to just use the reputation value without putting in the reading value. And I think, I mean, what we see from the data is that we are moving into writing is more important for the sake of writing it. And that's the part that is, I think, not so good.
Okay, a question from Ido. In addition to researchers, funders, publishers, what is the role of learned societies in the money cycle and in starting to fix the problem? For example, in wresting power back from publishers.
Yeah, so I think Learn Society have a lot to do here. I mean, not all of that, but they could invest into taking back from publisher. We have also to say, so this idea that publishers are these monolith and researchers are, again, it's not true. So some Learn Society became awfully rich with journals. So journals are a cash cow for whoever runs them. So it's not just if tomorrow I could have a magic wand and say all journals now belong to Learn Society, that wouldn't solve all the problems, right? Because you can still make a huge profit as a Learn Society. And the good thing about that, so is just to say that I'm aware that just going no profit and Learn Society is not the whole solution. But the good thing about that is that at least the money will be reinvested in the community rather than going outside of the system. And so it looks like a simple first step to have to incentivize societies to take back their journals and to put some simple rules from the funders that would say, prefer not-for-profit journals. Will not solve all the problem, will not solve all the trying to publish whatever to get ahead of the others, will not solve all this, but at least the profits will be reinvested in the community rather than going somewhere else.
There is a question by Bianca Dehan, which is, what about a third recipe for change, pre-registration or register reports?
Yeah, so I think pre-registration or register reports are very good things. I think they are a bit orthogonal to what we're saying here. So I think they are good per se. So they live in this space about the credibility of what we do. I am not sure that they could really solve the problems of the publishing industry. In a way, they would, because if everything is a registered report, then you will have a lower way to publish crap papers. But still, I think it's a different discussion, right? I think they are really good things per se. I'm a huge supporter of that. They belong much more into the credibility of science discussion rather than the sustainability of the publishing industry discussion.
Another question from Thomas. Isn't there a simple solution, Diamond OA journals with money provided by funders on the basis of quality?
Yeah. Yeah, but would it scale? I mean, I think in general that's the solution. So this, when you say recommunalization, that's what we want to do. Let's do this diamond journals. But then again, it's a network effect, right? So people want to go to nature because they know that other people know that nature is good. It takes time for these new journals to get the reputation, and in the meantime, is a coordination problem. And coordination problems are very, very hard to solve, and that's why we think that the top down is actually good. And then it's very hard to just say to mandate it. Okay, we need to have only diamond open access journals. We need to have the conversation about how much it will cost. We have to have a conversation about which journals will be created, and this part can only be done bottom up, like you guys are doing in Peru Community, right? So saying we create a new journal, we create a community. It takes time before it's established, and then at some point it gathers enough reputation to be a recommender that is well seen. And the publishers already have this reputation in their journals, and of course they are fighting back. They will not just let the stuff be stolen away. So I think that that's I mean, for me, that's the solution. That's the road. But getting there is less trivial than just saying, "Oh, let's do diamond open access supported by societies and the funders pay for it." I think that's a solution, but getting there is harder than just saying it.
So there was a question from Nicola, who perhaps left already. He was wondering, what's your take on the individual lab level? Old PIs could handle boycotting for-profit journals or bypassing publishers there by doing only preprints, but young scientists need these papers for their career, as long as this metric is being considered. So how
Yeah.
do we get out of this dilemma?
Yeah, so I think you answered your own question in partly. So again, if I am tenured, then I can say, oh, I'm not publishing a paper, I'm just putting it in preprint. But then for my PhD student, I will tell you, no, no, you do publish the paper. So this boils down to the fact that we need a certification system. Because one other solution would be just read the bloody papers. Why are you looking at signals from the market? And the answer to that is that you cannot. This is too big, and so you need this signal. So I think it looks stupid, but I think it's pretty rational for older PIs to say, I will do preprints, and to say to their PhD students, don't. So the way to change it is to change the incentive scheme. And it's not up to the PI to change the incentive scheme. It's not up to the PhD student to change the incentive scheme. It's up to the funders to change the incentive schemes. And again, how do you do it? And I think it's step by step. You have to create alternative journals, fund them, and then little by little, people will move to the new thing. You cannot just offload all the cost on the PhD students. So it makes sense for people to say, I'm old enough to take the cost, but for you, just go ahead. And in the meantime, if the funders are creating the alternatives, or the community is creating the alternative, we could gradually move to this other equilibrium.
There was a second question. So how do we deal with the supply-demand issue you point out? So there are much more for-profit journals than non-profit journals run by societies. So when one looks for where to publish, there's a strong incentive to go towards for-profit, just out of the fact that the offer there is higher.
Yeah, so we need to create more not-for-profit journals, and that's what we were discussing even before. So imagine all the money that gets spent into APC, and if the National Science Foundation said, a share of this money, not all of it. I mean, 10% of what I spent on APC I will not pay APC anymore, but I will give it to society to create other journals. And these will create this new offer that will allow people to choose. And this is why I find this peer community in the Unjournal, other things that are happening that are very good, because they are increasing this offer. The second problem is this reputation conundrum, that the reputation is owned by the journal. And that's why we think that recommunalization is the other. So you can create new journals by funding them, and then you can give money to the society saying, buy your journal back. And in this case, you buy your reputation back in the control. So I think it's in the short term, you have to live with the system, but in the longer term, we can create alternatives. It costs so much money that some part of it can be funded into creating alternatives and change the balance between for-profit and not-for-profit journals.
There is also a question by Tristan Salor. You quickly mentioned paper mills that are parts
Mhm.
of a bigger sort of a shadow market of scientific
Mhm.
publication and works, citation mills, conference mills, etc. Have you planned to work upon those links between the actual regular and shadow scientific publication markets?
No, so I mean, me, I don't, and I don't think that my strict authors do. Some of them do. There are people doing this much better than I would ever do. So there are people working on paper mills, the Guillaume Cabanakis, and lots of people in the PubPeer. They go into his PubPeer website. There is a Slack channel of sleuths, so people that are in forensic meta science. They do it much better than I would ever. I think that's a problem. I think it's a different problem than what we're looking at here. So what we wanted to do in this paper is to look at this, how the legitimate actors are working. Then there is fraud, and fraud is unambiguously bad, and paper mills are unambiguously bad. But we are dealing with, okay, let's look at the legitimate ones and let's find the problems in the legitimate ones, and maybe we can solve them. And of course, we should look at fraud. I do think it's an order of magnitude less, because again, since I'm an economist, I work a lot in these public good games and these common pool resources. I think that small deviation by big players are actually in the end more impactful than the big deviation by small players. So don't take me wrong, paper mills are really bad, but even if you squash them, all of them, we will still have all these big problems. And a big publisher doing some crazy stuff might have more average impact than having a paper mill that is doing very crazy stuff.
There's another question from Eduardo. The question about the top-down incentive to change the system will always hit a wall where the seniors making decisions, so in universities, funding agencies, etc., will likely receive some sort of dividend from the publishers, right? They probably act as council, board, senior editors, and investors. So how do we shift to a system that frees itself from publishers if people
Yeah.
making decisions most likely profit a lot from the rigged system?
I don't know. I don't know. I see your point. It's called regulatory capture in my branch of economics, and I see that this can happen. Personally, I didn't see it that much. What I saw in the French ministry, in other places, that people really want to change. I mean, maybe not all of them, and I think people are more benevolent than you would make out. So it is a problem, but I think it's smaller than you make it. And one way is through proposing changes. So the bottom up, I don't want you to give this floor thinking that the bottom approach is useless. I think it's very important again because it produces opportunities and it shows that the world can be different and it shows that other alternatives are actually working. And then at some point we shift enough that even the top brass will start saying, hey, that's not bad. That's what happened with open source software. I mean, open source software was something that was, a niche. And then it became better and better and better. And at some point, even the top brass at the top companies at Microsoft, they said, actually, it's better to use open software and to contribute to open source software than to continue with our stuff. So I think that there is a point there in which I don't think that the higher up are as bad as you picture them. And the second thing is that you could change the system from the bottom up in such a way that at some point, even a very asshole, selfish, big guy will say, actually, it's better to choose this other option. So I think it's possible.